When I first bought my electric vehicle, I thought the biggest challenge would be finding public charging stations on road trips. Never in a million years did I think the real problem would come from my own neighborhood, the place I had invested, not only money, but trust. The Homeowners Association, or HOA, was supposed to keep our community neat and organized. Instead, it became the stage for one of the most frustrating, unbelievable battles I have ever fought. It all started the day after my EV charger was installed. I had worked with a licensed electrician, received city permits, and even notified the HOA board out of courtesy, even though my property's deed clearly stated that the driveway and garage area were mine alone. Still, I wanted everything to be transparent. The installation went smoothly, and for a brief moment, I felt a sense of pride. Not only was I contributing to a cleaner environment, but I had also invested in my home's future value. The very next morning, I noticed something odd. A neighbor I had only seen a few times was parked in my driveway, her car plugged into my charger. At first, I thought it must have been some sort of emergency. Maybe she had run out of charge and panicked. I decided to be neighborly and not overreact. But then it happened again and again. Within a week, I discovered that multiple residents in the community were taking turns using my charger without permission. When I confronted one of them, she brushed me off with a smug smile. "Oh, the board said this is community property now. You cannot hog it for yourself. Community property. My charger." That was laughable. I had the receipts, the permits, the installation contract, and most importantly, the deed that proved the driveway was my personal property. But when I brought it up at the next HOA meeting, the president, a woman named Carol, known for her iron fist and her talent for making rules up on the spot, dismissed me. She claimed that because the charger was visible from the street, it should be available to all residents for fairness. I could feel the anger bubbling inside me. It was not just about electricity or the cost of charging. It was about principle. It was about the HOA deciding that something I had spent thousands of dollars on suddenly belonged to everyone else, simply because they wanted it. I knew right then that I could not let this slide. Still, going head-to-head with Carol and her loyal board members would not be easy. They thrived on intimidation, shaming anyone who dared to question their authority. Many neighbors had already learned to stay quiet, fearing fines, harassment, or endless letters about trivial rule violations. I, however, was different. I had dealt with bullies before, and I knew the best way to beat them was not by yelling, but by proving them wrong in a way that left no room for denial. So I came up with a plan. If they wanted to treat my charger like it was public property, then I would let them use it, but not without consequences. I installed a hidden device, one that would track every single watt of electricity, every car that connected, every cent that was drained. More than that, I added a little trap, something they would never see coming. I knew I was about to walk into a war with the HOA, and there was no turning back. But this was my home, my property, and my investment. If they thought they could bully me into submission, they were about to learn a very costly lesson. The day my electric vehicle charger was installed felt like a milestone. For months, I had been researching EVs, weighing the pros and cons, studying the costs, and finally, after much deliberation, I had invested in one. To me, it was not just a car. It was a commitment to a cleaner lifestyle, a step toward the future, and a reflection of the values I wanted to live by. The installation was not cheap. I hired a licensed electrician, submitted all the necessary paperwork, and even had the city inspector approve the setup. It was professional, legal, and neatly done. The charger was mounted beside my garage, connected directly to my home's power grid. I remember standing there, watching the electrician tighten the last bolt, and feeling proud. This thing will outlast the car, he had told me. patting the unit with a grin. That evening, I plugged in my car for the first time. The soft glow of the charging light felt almost ceremonial. I imagined years of convenience. No more late-night gas station runs. No scrambling for public chargers. This was my investment, my property, my peace of mind. Or so I thought. The very next morning, something seemed off. As I stepped outside to collect the newspaper, I froze. A silver sedan I did not recognize was parked in my driveway. Its cable snaked from the car to my charger. I blinked, thinking maybe I was still half asleep. The audacity of it was surreal. I approached the vehicle, uncertain. A woman in yoga pants and oversized sunglasses emerged from the car. She smiled casually, as if nothing unusual had happened. "Oh, good morning," she chirped. "I hope you don't mind. My car was low on charge, and your charger was just right there. So convenient." I stared at her, trying to process her words. Excuse me, but this is my driveway, and my charger. You cannot just plug in without asking." She waved her hand dismissively. "Oh, the board mentioned it. They said since it's outside, it's for community use. It's not a big deal. Community use, my charger." I wanted to argue right then, but I could feel my temper rising, and I did not want to explode in front of a stranger. I forced a polite smile. "I understand you needed a charge, but this is private property. Next time, please don't use it without permission." She gave me a strange look, as though I had just said something offensive. Well, that's not what Carol said. She told me it was meant to be shared, and with that, she unplugged, slid into her car, and drove off as though nothing unusual had happened. I shook my head in disbelief. Maybe this was just a misunderstanding. Surely, Carol, the HOA president, would not be so bold as to claim my property for the community. But I was wrong. The next day, it happened again. This time, a different neighbor, then another. By the end of the week, I counted at least 4 different vehicles that had used my charger without permission. My electricity bill spiked noticeably, and every morning I felt like I was waking up to a free-for-all in my own driveway. The final straw came on Saturday afternoon. I returned from grocery shopping to find 2 cars lined up. One plugged into my charger, the other waiting its turn. Like this was some sort of gas station. "Excuse me," I called, my voice sharper than I intended. A young man leaned out the window of the second car. "Yeah, what do you think you are doing?" He shrugged. "Charging. Carol told us it's allowed. Said it's for everyone in the HOA." Something in me snapped. "It is not for everyone. I paid for this. I installed it on my property. Nobody else gets to use it unless I say so. Do you understand?" He looked uneasy now, muttering something under his breath before driving off. The woman using the charger gave me a defiant glare before slowly unplugging and leaving. That evening, I opened my files. The deed, the permits, the electrician's contract. Everything proved the same fact. The charger and driveway were mine. But if the HOA president was spreading lies, I needed to confront her directly. The next HOA meeting was 2 days later. The meeting hall was crowded, as usual. Folding chairs lined the room. The faint hum of fluorescent lights overhead. People whispered about landscaping, parking violations, and petty disputes. At the center table sat Carol, the HOA president. Carol was a woman in her late 50s, with a perfectly pressed blazer and a stare that could cut glass. She had been president for years, and everyone knew she ruled the neighborhood with an iron grip. Complaints about her were endless, but she had allies and enough fear on her side to keep her throne intact. When it was time for open discussion, I stood. "I need to address an issue," I began. My voice was calm, but my pulse raced. "Several neighbors have been using my EV charger without permission. This is theft of electricity and an invasion of my property rights. I want to make it very clear that the charger belongs to me. It was installed legally and paid for entirely out of my pocket." Murmurs spread across the room. Some looked surprised. Others avoided eye contact. Carol leaned back in her chair, her lips curling into a faint smile. "Yes, we've discussed this already," she said smoothly. "Since the charger is located outside, it falls under community access. We must ensure fairness in our neighborhood." The room fell silent. I clenched my fists at my sides. "That is not true. The charger is on my deeded property. My driveway is mine, not community space. I have all the paperwork here, if anyone would like to see it." Carol's smile widened, condescending. "It is not about paperwork. It is about fairness. You live in a community, and resources must be shared. You cannot expect to keep such a useful amenity to yourself when others need it." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Some neighbors nodded timidly, clearly afraid of opposing her. Others exchanged nervous glances. "This is not an amenity," I shot back. My voice was louder now, steady with anger. "This is private property. You are encouraging theft. And if it continues, I will be forced to pursue legal action." Carol's expression hardened. "Threats will not get you far here. Remember, the board has the authority to enforce rules." "No," I said firmly, locking eyes with her. "The board has the authority to enforce community rules, not to steal from individuals. And I will not allow this to continue." The tension was thick. For a moment, it felt like the whole room held its breath. Finally, Carol banged her gavel and dismissed the topic, muttering something about revisiting it later. But I knew then what I had suspected all along. This was not a misunderstanding. It was a power play. Carol believed she could take whatever she wanted, rewrite the rules, and expect everyone to bow. And maybe most people would, but not me. As I left the meeting, neighbors avoided my eyes. Some whispered words of encouragement under their breath, too afraid to speak out loud. But I did not need their voices. I had already made up my mind. If Carol and the HOA wanted to treat my charger like community property, then I would let them. But I would also show them what it meant to cross the line. I had dealt with bullies before, and I was about to teach this one a very expensive lesson. The days following that HOA meeting were some of the most frustrating of my life. Carol's smug dismissal echoed in my head every time I looked at my driveway. She had not just dismissed my argument, she had dismissed me. And worse, she had empowered the neighbors to keep taking advantage of something that was not theirs. Within a week, the abuse escalated. Cars rolled into my driveway at all hours of the day. Some plugged in for 20 minutes, others for hours. A few even had the gall to wave at me through my window, as if to say, "Thanks for the free power." At first, I tried speaking to them directly. "Please stop using my charger." I told one man as he unplugged his SUV. He shrugged. "Take it up with Carol. She said it's community property." Another time, I confronted a young woman in a sleek crossover. "This is private property," I told her firmly. She looked me dead in the eye and said, "If you didn't want people to use it, you shouldn't have installed it where everyone can see." That one stung more than I wanted to admit. The arrogance, the entitlement. It was as though the very concept of ownership had vanished. My electricity bill skyrocketed that month. When I opened it, the number nearly made me choke. I was paying to fuel other people's cars. And not just paying a little. Hundreds of dollars gone, simply because Carol decided she could rewrite the rules. It was not about the money anymore. It was about principle. I knew that fighting Carol directly in the HOA would be futile. She had her loyal board members, and the rest of the community was either too scared or too apathetic to stand up to her. If I wanted to win, I had to be smart. I had to be strategic. That night, I sat at my desk, laptop open, researching solutions. I dove deep into forums, technical manuals, and homeowner rights pages. The more I read, the clearer the picture became. I needed evidence, undeniable, irrefutable proof that my property was being stolen. That was when the idea struck me. I ordered a special monitoring device, online, a compact energy meter that could record every watt of power that passed through the charger. Not only could it track usage in real time, but it also logged dates, times, and total consumption. Better yet, I found a model with a remote access app that would notify me whenever the charger was active. But I did not stop there. I also bought a small weatherproof security camera. It would be discreetly mounted near the garage, angled perfectly to capture any car that pulled into my driveway. Faces, license plates, timestamps. All of it would be recorded. Finally, I set up a lockable switch in the system. To the average user, it would look like the charger was functioning normally, but with a single tap on my phone, I could cut the power supply. No one but me would know why it stopped working. It was, in every sense of the word, a trap. The first night I activated the system, I felt a strange thrill. Half nervous, half determined. I did not have to wait long. At 11:42 p.m., my phone buzzed. Charger active. I crept to the window and peeked through the blinds. Sure enough, a blue sedan was parked in my driveway, cable running to my charger. The security camera's small light blinked, recording everything. I tapped the app, cut power. The charger light flickered and died. From my window, I saw the woman in the car frown, step out, and jiggle the cable. She muttered something, looking around as though the machine itself had betrayed her. After a few minutes of frustration, she finally gave up and drove off. I smiled to myself. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I had the upper hand. But this was just the beginning. Within days, I had a detailed log of every unauthorized use. Names, cars, timestamps, kilowatt hours consumed. All neatly stored on my laptop. I could calculate exactly how much electricity had been stolen, down to the penny. Some of the numbers were staggering. One neighbor alone had drained enough power to equal nearly $70 in a single week. Another had used it daily, as though my charger was their personal gas pump. The footage from the camera only made things better. Crystal clear videos showed neighbors brazenly pulling into my driveway, plugging in, sometimes even chatting with each other while their cars charged. In one clip, 2 teenagers laughed as they posed next to the charger, snapping selfies like it was a novelty. Each recording, each log, was a nail in Carol's coffin. Still, I played it cool. I did not confront anyone, did not send angry emails or letters. I let them believe they were winning, because the more they used it, the more evidence I collected. But the situation was starting to affect me in other ways. Some neighbors avoided me altogether now, clearly uncomfortable with the tension. Others gave me smug looks as they passed. Emboldened by Carol's decree, walking through the neighborhood felt like walking through enemy territory. One evening, as I pulled into my driveway, I found Carol herself standing beside my charger, clipboard in hand. "What are you doing?" I asked, rolling down my window. She gave me a thin smile. "And just checking on things. We need to ensure the charger is accessible. There have been complaints about you unplugging people's cars." I parked, stepped out, and faced her. "It is not accessible, it is mine, and I have every right to unplug anyone trespassing on my property." Her eyes narrowed. "Careful, dear. You are developing quite the reputation for being difficult. The board will not look kindly on that." The sheer arrogance of her tone nearly made me laugh. "Difficult? Carol, I am defending my property from theft. If anyone here is breaking the rules, it is you." Her lips tightened. "We will see what the board has to say about that." And with that, she walked off, heels clicking against the pavement like a judge's gavel. I stood there for a moment, fists clenched, but then a thought calmed me. Let her talk. Let her threaten. The trap was already set. Soon, I would not need to argue anymore. The evidence would speak for itself. That night, as I reviewed the logs, I felt a sense of control I had not felt in weeks. Every detail was neatly documented. Every charge, every stolen kilowatt, every car caught on camera. I knew I had enough to embarrass Carol and the HOA, but I did not just want embarrassment. I wanted justice. I wanted them to see that I was not a man to be bullied, not a pushover who would fold under their arrogance. The showdown was coming, and I was ready. The next HOA meeting arrived like a storm cloud I had been waiting for. I had spent weeks gathering evidence, watching the data pile up on my laptop. Logs of kilowatt hours consumed, timestamps down to the minute, and hours of video footage capturing my so-called neighbors trespassing onto my property to steal my electricity. Every beep from the charger app had felt like one more nail in the coffin of Carol's little empire. This time, I was not nervous. I was prepared. The room buzzed with low chatter as residents filed in, clutching notebooks and muttering about petty grievances. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, and the faint scent of stale coffee lingered in the air. At the center of it all sat Carol, her posture as rigid as ever, lips pursed into her usual self-satisfied smile. She tapped her pen against her clipboard, glancing around the room like a queen surveying her court. When the agenda reached community concerns, I stood. "I have an issue to raise," I said clearly, projecting my voice so no one could pretend they had not heard. "It concerns my EV charger and the repeated unauthorized use of my property." A few heads turned. Some people shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Carol leaned back in her chair, her eyes narrowing just slightly. "We already discussed this, did we not? The charger is considered accessible to the community. There is no need to drag this out." I took a slow breath, then pulled out a thick folder from my bag. I set it down on the table with a heavy thump. The sound echoed through the room. "Actually," I said, my voice calm but cutting, "there is every need, because what has been happening here is not community use, it is theft. And I have proof." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Carol's smile faltered for just a moment. I opened the folder and pulled out the first set of documents. This is a complete log of every kilowatt hour drained from my charger over the past month. The device records usage with exact timestamps. Each entry corresponds to the date and time when cars were plugged in. I flipped to another page. This is the financial breakdown. In just 4 weeks, more than $380 worth of electricity has been stolen from me. Gasps erupted around the room. "And this," I continued, reaching into my bag again, "is video evidence. Every single neighbor who plugged into my charger without permission has been recorded. Faces, license plates, timestamps, all here." I held up a USB drive. "I have already backed this up in 3 different locations. So even if something were to happen to this copy, the evidence is safe." The room went dead silent. Carol shifted uncomfortably, her eyes darting between the board members. "This is unnecessary," she began, her voice tight. "You are making a scene. We could have handled this quietly." "Quietly," I shot back, my voice rising. "You encouraged people to trespass on my property. You told them my charger was community property when you had no legal authority to make that claim. You cost me hundreds of dollars and weeks of harassment. That is not quiet. That is criminal." Several neighbors began whispering, their faces pale. One man in the back raised his hand timidly. "Wait, are you saying we could get in trouble for using it?" "Yes," I said firmly, scanning the room. "What you all have been doing is theft of services. I have enough evidence here to file a police report. Every single unauthorized use is documented, every face recorded. If I take this to the authorities, it will not just be the HOA on the hook. It will be each and every one of you who plugged in." The whispers turned into a low hum of panic. People shifted in their seats, some glaring at Carol, others staring at the floor. Carol slammed her hand on the table. "This is absurd. You are trying to intimidate your neighbors with threats of legal action. That is not how communities function." I took a step closer, locking eyes with her. No, Carol. This is not intimidation. This is accountability. You thought you could bully me into surrendering my property. You thought you could twist the rules, and everyone would fall in line. But you miscalculated. Because I am not afraid of you. Her face reddened. And for the first time, I saw something in her expression I had never seen before. Fear. A woman in the front row spoke up timidly. Carol, did you really say the charger was community property? Carol sputtered. Well, I may have suggested that sharing was the fair thing to do. That is not what you said to me. Another man interrupted. You told me flat out it was public property now. That is why I used it. Voices began rising all around the room. Angry, accusing. You told me the same thing. You said the board approved it. You never mentioned we could get in trouble. Carol's composure cracked. She opened her mouth, but the words faltered under the weight of the backlash. Her allies on the board shifted uncomfortably, avoiding eye contact. I let the chaos build for a moment, then raised my voice above the noise. I am willing to be reasonable, I said, and the room quieted. I have not yet filed a police report, but make no mistake, I can and I will if this continues. What I want is simple. The board must acknowledge, in writing, that the charger is my private property. No more lies, no more theft. If you want a community charger, then the HOA can fund and install one in a common area. But mine is off limits. A board member cleared his throat nervously. That seems fair. Carol whipped her head toward him, eyes blazing. You cannot just, but she was cut off by another member. He is right, Carol. This has gone too far. If he really has evidence, then legally we are exposed. We could all be held liable. The tide shifted rapidly. Neighbors who had once stayed silent were now speaking openly. He has the paperwork. He has proof. We cannot let this fall on us. The vote happened faster than I expected. One by one, the board members raised their hands. A formal acknowledgement would be issued. The charger was my private property. Carol sat rigid, her face pale with rage, as the board she once controlled turned against her. When the motion passed, a wave of relief washed over me. For the first time in weeks, I felt the crushing weight lift from my shoulders. I looked directly at Carol. You tried to make an example of me, but in the end, the example is you. You cannot bully your way into taking what does not belong to you. Her lips trembled, but she said nothing. The meeting adjourned in awkward silence. The once mighty Carol, left sitting alone as neighbors filed out, some apologetic, some embarrassed, all of them shaken. As I walked out the door, the night air felt cooler, freer. The trap had worked, and I knew one thing for certain. Carol's reign as HOA president was crumbling. The morning after the showdown, the neighborhood felt different. For weeks, every time I stepped outside, I had felt watched, judged, even mocked. But now, as I walked to my mailbox, there was a silence in the air. No cars lined up in my driveway. No strangers casually plugging into my charger. No smug waves or dismissive comments. Just quiet. I opened my electricity bill later that day, bracing myself. For the first time in a month, the numbers looked normal. My trap had worked. My evidence had struck home. And the board's vote had put everything in writing. The charger was mine. But victory was not just about reclaiming my driveway. It was about what came next. Carol had ruled over our HOA like a queen for years. She thrived on fear, on neighbors' reluctance to challenge her, on the belief that the board's word was law. But now the illusion was shattered. At the next meeting, she tried to regain control, but the damage was done. Neighbors, she began, her voice sharp but shaky. We cannot allow one person's hostility to divide this community. I did what I thought was best for fairness. Fairness? Someone interrupted from the back row. You told us it was community property. You lied to us. Carol's jaw tightened. I did not lie. I may have been misunderstood. Misunderstood? Another neighbor snapped. You put us at risk of being charged with theft. My husband was furious when he saw those videos. The room erupted with voices. Not whispers this time, but bold accusations. People who had been too afraid to speak before were now lining up to throw their complaints at her feet. They were not just angry about the charger. They were angry about everything. The petty fines, the arbitrary landscaping rules, the bullying letters. One man stood up. "I move that we call for a vote to remove Carol as president." The words hung in the air like thunder. Carol's face drained of color. "You cannot do that. The board has procedures." "Then let us follow them," the man said firmly. "Right now." And so they did. For the first time in years, Carol's control slipped completely. The board members, still rattled from nearly being dragged into legal trouble, did not defend her. Hands went up one by one. By the time the vote ended, it was unanimous. Carol was out. Watching her step down was surreal. The woman who had smirked at me, who had dismissed my rights with a flick of her hand, was now forced to pack up her clipboard and leave the table she once dominated. She avoided my gaze as she brushed past me, but I did not need her acknowledgement. Her silence was enough. In the weeks that followed, the neighborhood began to change. Without Carol's iron grip, the board operated more fairly. Meetings felt less like trials and more like actual discussions. Some neighbors even stopped by my house to apologize. One evening, a man who had used my charger approached me as I was watering the front lawn. He looked embarrassed, shifting his weight from one foot to the other. "Hey," he said quietly. "I just wanted to say, I am sorry. I should not have used your charger. I thought it was allowed, but that is no excuse. I hope you know it was not personal." I studied him for a moment, then nodded. "I appreciate you saying that. Just respect boundaries next time." He nodded quickly. "Absolutely. Lesson learned." Others followed in their own way. A wave from across the street. A quick, "sorry about before." It did not erase the frustration of the past months, but it was something. For me, the biggest lesson was about standing firm. Carol had assumed, like so many bullies, that fear and authority would keep me in line. She thought if she declared something, no one would dare challenge her. And for a while, she was right. Most people stayed quiet, but the truth is, authority crumbles when confronted with evidence and courage. My trap had not just exposed the theft, it had exposed her weakness. One night, sitting in my garage with the EV humming quietly as it charged, I felt a deep sense of satisfaction. This machine, this charger, had become more than a tool. It had become a symbol of my boundary, my independence, and reclaiming it had reminded me of something vital. You cannot let people rewrite the truth just because it is convenient for them. A few weeks later, the HOA announced plans to install a community-funded charging station near the clubhouse. This time, it would be paid for collectively, with clear rules and designated spots. Ironically, it was almost exactly what Carol had claimed to want, but done the right way. I could not help but smile when I heard. Maybe some good had come out of the chaos, after all. As for Carol, she vanished from the spotlight. Word around the neighborhood was that she had resigned from the board entirely. Some said she was considering moving. I did not care enough to follow her story. In my mind, she was already history, a cautionary tale of arrogance and overreach. One Saturday morning, I stood outside sipping coffee, enjoying the rare quiet of the street. My neighbor Linda walked by with her dog and stopped to chat. "You know," she said, "I think the whole neighborhood owes you a thank you." I raised an eyebrow. "A thank you?" She nodded. Most of us were too scared to stand up to Carol. We complained behind closed doors. But we never confronted her. You did. And because of that, things are better now. So, thank you. Her words warmed me more than the coffee in my hand. "I was just protecting what was mine," I said. She smiled. Sometimes, that is exactly what a community needs. To remind people of the line between sharing and stealing. That night, I wrote down the entire ordeal in a journal. I wanted to remember it, not just as a story about a charger, but as a story about standing up when it mattered. Never let someone else decide the worth of your effort. I wrote, never let arrogance disguise itself as fairness. And never ever underestimate the power of evidence. With that final thought, I closed the journal and plugged in my car. The charger clicked, the familiar hum filling the garage. For the first time since this battle began, the sound was not just routine, it was victory.